Holbrook Blinn was buried in the Blinn family plot at the historic Sleepy Hollow Cemetery in Sleepy Hollow, New York, a place filled with the graves of other notable figures. Despite his considerable fame and the prominence of his family, his individual grave was never marked with a headstone. While he rests alongside his relatives, there is no specific marker to identify his final resting place. An oversight, or perhaps a family preference for anonymity, that leaves the actor's exact location a matter of cemetery records alone. Blanche Walsh died from pneumonia at the age of 42. By the time of her death, the vast fortune she had earned during her heyday had largely dissipated. A common story for many performers of her era whose finances were not managed for the long term. She passed away in far more modest circumstances than her years of stardom would have suggested. She was buried in the cemetery of the Church of St. Peter in New Brighton on Staten Island, New York. Due to her diminished financial state and perhaps a lack of close family to arrange for it, no headstone was ever erected to mark her grave. The final resting place of the woman who was once a celebrated star of the American theater remains completely anonymous and unmarked. Mary Maurice worked almost until her death, a testament to her enduring passion for her craft. She passed away in April of 1916 in Port Carbon, Pennsylvania, at the age of 71. After her death, her body was brought back to New York for burial. She was laid to rest in the Actors Fund plot at the Cemetery of the Evergreens, located on the border of Brooklyn and Queens. The Actors Fund of America, a charitable organization founded to support entertainment professionals, has maintained plots in various cemeteries for performers who died without the means for a private burial. While the plot itself is designated as belonging to the fund, the individual graves within it, particularly from that early era, were often left unmarked. Such was the fate of Mary Maurice. Despite her prolific career and her status as a beloved early film icon, her specific grave bears no personal headstone, leaving her final resting place anonymous among the many other performers buried beside her. O'Neill himself was a formidable actor, winning the prestigious Clarence Derwent Award for his Broadway debut in the 1944 production of Anna Lucasta, a role he would reprise for years. Beyond his own performances, his most enduring legacy was his work as an administrator and activist. In 1964, he was elected president of the Actors Equity Association, the main stage actors union, becoming the first African American to hold the position. He served for 9 years, fighting for integrated casting and better opportunities for all performers. O'Neill remained a respected elder statesman of the theater world throughout his life. He passed away in August of 1992 at his home in Manhattan after a long illness. He was 86 years old. His death was mourned by the many actors he had mentored and fought for over his long and influential career. After his passing, his body was cremated, and his ashes were interred in the churchyard of St. James's Episcopal Church in St. James, New York, on Long Island. For reasons that are not entirely clear, perhaps a desire for simplicity or an oversight by his estate, his final resting place was not given a marker. There is no headstone or plaque to indicate the presence of the man who co-founded the American Negro Theater and broke racial barriers as the head of the Actors Union. The ashes of this pivotal figure in the history of American theater lie in an anonymous grave on the church grounds. Frank Tinney died in November of 1940 at a hospital on Long Island, New York, a forgotten man. He was buried at Holy Cross Cemetery in Yeadon, Pennsylvania. Having died penniless and disgraced, there was no money for a headstone, and no family or friends stepped forward to provide one. The grave of the man who was once a king of comedy remains unmarked. Bobby Harron was buried in his family's plot at Calvary Cemetery in Queens, New York. For reasons lost to time, no individual headstone was ever placed to mark his grave. While the Harron family plot has a central monument, the specific location where the young star was laid to rest is not identified, leaving his final resting place anonymous within the family grounds. Florence Labadie died from her injuries, becoming one of the first major movie stars to die while at the height of their career. She was just 29 years old. After her death, a custody battle over her estate ensued between her adoptive parents and a woman claiming to be her biological mother, further complicating her affairs. She was buried in an unmarked grave in the Greenwood Cemetery in Brooklyn, New York. Her grave's location was eventually confirmed by historians, but for nearly a century, the resting place of this pioneering and beloved actress remained without a marker. a sad and anonymous end for a vibrant young star. Bennett was known for his tempestuous personality and often turbulent personal life. He died of a heart attack in October of 1944 in Los Angeles, California, at the age of 74. Despite his fame and the success of his daughters, his final arrangements were marked by a strange degree of neglect. He was buried in the Bennett family plot at the Old Lyme Cemetery in Lyme, Connecticut, a picturesque New England graveyard. For reasons that are not entirely clear, perhaps due to family disputes or simple oversight, no headstone was ever erected for him. His wife, Mabel, and other family members have markers, but the grave of the patriarch himself remained anonymous for over 6 decades. It wasn't until 2005 that a group of theater and film historians, troubled by this omission, raised the funds to have a proper headstone placed on his grave. For more than 60 years, however, the resting place of this important stage actor was completely unmarked. Lord's health began to decline in the 1940s, and she was eventually forced to retire from the stage she loved. She spent her final years living in relative seclusion. In 1950, after being involved in a car accident, she was taken to a hospital in Alamogordo, New Mexico, where she was also diagnosed with tuberculosis. She died there in October of that year, at the age of 60. Her body was transported to her family's hometown of North Adams, Massachusetts, for burial. She was interred in the Southview Cemetery in a family plot. Despite her status as one of the great dramatic actresses of her generation, a performer who had profoundly influenced the craft of acting, her grave was never given a marker. There is a central stone for the Lord family, but Pauline's individual resting place is not identified. The reasons for this are unknown, but it remains a surprising oversight for an artist of her stature. Cambridge was in Burbank, California, working on the set of the television movie Victory at Entebbe, in which he was cast as the Ugandan dictator Idi Amin. While on a break from filming, he suffered a massive heart attack and died suddenly at the age of just 43. His unexpected death at such a young age was a major shock to the entertainment industry. A large funeral was held in Los Angeles, attended by many of his famous friends and colleagues. Following the service, his body was buried at Forest Lawn Memorial Park in the Hollywood Hills. Despite his fame and the success he had achieved, his grave remained unmarked for more than 2 decades. The reasons for this are unclear, but it was a situation that troubled many of his admirers. Finally, in 2002, a headstone was placed on his grave through the efforts of his fans and a program dedicated to marking the graves of notable African American figures. Sissel's clear diction as a singer and his sophisticated lyrics helped to elevate the form of the musical revue. Sissel continued to lead successful orchestras in the United States and Europe for decades, remaining an active and respected figure in the music world well into his old age. He was also a dedicated advocate for the rights of black musicians, serving as the first president of the Negro Actors Guild. He passed away in December of 1975 in Tampa, Florida, at the venerable age of 86. His body was brought back to New York for burial. He was laid to rest at Cypress Hills National Cemetery in Brooklyn, a military cemetery, in recognition of his service during the First World War. For many years after his interment, the grave of this musical pioneer was marked only with a simple, standard-issue military marker that did not fully acknowledge his immense cultural contributions. It wasn't until 2018 that a more fitting headstone, detailing his role in creating Shuffle Along and his musical legacy, was finally dedicated at his resting place, correcting a long-standing oversight. On the morning of February 2, 1922, Taylor was found dead in his home, a bungalow in the fashionable Westlake Park area of Los Angeles. He had been shot in the back. The ensuing police investigation became a media circus, revealing a hidden, scandalous side to Hollywood. The list of suspects was a who's who of the film colony, including actresses Mary Miles Minter and Mabel Normand, both of whom had complicated relationships with Taylor, as well as his former valet and other shadowy figures. The scandal ruined the careers of both Minter and Normand and created a public relations nightmare for the film industry, contributing to the implementation of the restrictive Hays Code. The murder was never solved, and it remains one of Hollywood's greatest and most enduring mysteries. Taylor was buried at Hollywood Memorial Park Cemetery, now known as Hollywood Forever. For more than 75 years, the grave of the man at the center of this infamous crime remained unmarked. It wasn't until the 1990s that a proper headstone was finally placed, paid for by a group of historians and fans of silent film. Lenore Ulrich died on December 30th, 1970, at the age of 78. Despite the great wealth she had accumulated during her career, she had become a frugal and somewhat eccentric recluse. She was buried in a plot she had purchased long before at the Oakland Cemetery in her hometown of New Ulm, Minnesota. For reasons that remain a mystery, no headstone or marker of any kind was ever placed on her grave. The final resting place of the woman who was once a glittering Broadway star, celebrated for her fiery passion, is a simple, anonymous patch of grass in a Minnesota cemetery. Ada Overton Walker's career was tragically cut short. After her husband's death in 1911, she continued to perform, but her own health began to fail. She suffered from kidney disease, and her condition worsened rapidly. In October of 1914, she died in her apartment in New York City at the tragically young age of 34. Her death was a significant loss for the Black theatrical community, which had lost one of its most innovative and elegant stars. A large funeral was held, attended by the leading figures of Black entertainment. Like her husband, who had died 3 years earlier, she was buried in an unmarked grave. Her final resting place is at St. Michael's Cemetery in East Elmhurst, Queens, New York. For over a century, the grave of this crucial figure in the history of American dance and musical theater has remained without a headstone, a silent and anonymous memorial to a queen who lost her crown far too soon. Mums Mabley continued to perform until she suffered a heart attack during a show in 1975. She died a few weeks later in a hospital in White Plains, New York, at the age of 81. Despite her long and successful career, her final arrangements were handled with a surprising lack of ceremony. She was buried at the Ferncliff Cemetery in Hartsdale, New York, a cemetery known for its many celebrity residents. However, for more than 35 years, the grave of the woman known as the funniest woman in the world remained completely unmarked. There was no headstone to commemorate her life or her immense contribution to the art of comedy. This oversight was finally rectified in 2011, when a group of her fans and admirers, including the comedian Whoopi Goldberg, raised the money to purchase and install a proper granite monument. The headstone is engraved with her portrait and the simple, fitting epitaph, "The Funny Lady." Tim Moore was a veteran comedian and actor with a career that spanned over half a century, from the rough-and-tumble worlds of carnivals and vaudeville to the bright lights of Broadway. He was a seasoned performer, skilled in acrobatics, comedy, and stagecraft, who spent decades honing his craft on the Black vaudeville circuit. He even had a successful career as a prizefighter for a time. By the 1920s, he was a headliner, starring in Broadway shows, and becoming a well-respected figure in the African-American entertainment community. However, his greatest and most enduring fame came at the very end of his career, when he was in his 60s. In 1951, he was cast in the role that would define his legacy, George Kingfish Stevens, in the controversial television adaptation of the radio show Amos and Andy. As the conniving but charming leader of the Mystic Knights of the Sea Lodge, Moore's brilliant comedic timing and expressive face made the Kingfish an iconic television character. Despite the show's popularity, it was criticized by civil rights groups for promoting negative stereotypes, and it was taken off the air after just 2 seasons, though it lived on in syndicated reruns for years. After the show ended, Moore found it difficult to get work. He returned to performing on the stage, but his health began to fail. He died of pulmonary tuberculosis in December of 1958 in Los Angeles, at the age of 71. At the time of his death, he was nearly destitute. His funeral was paid for by contributions from his friends and colleagues in the entertainment industry. He was buried at the Rosedale Cemetery, now known as the Angelus Rosedale Cemetery, in Los Angeles. Due to his poverty, no headstone was ever purchased for his grave. For decades, the final resting place of the man who brought one of television's most memorable, if controversial, characters to life remained completely unmarked. A monument was finally placed on his grave many years later by his family.